One unexpected moment, one silent courtroom, and suddenly everything people thought they knew about the Karen Reed case was thrown into question. For months, prosecutors and the defense had battled over evidence, timelines, and witness testimony, slowly tearing a tight-knit community apart. But absolutely no one inside that courtroom expected what would happen next. Could a single courtroom shock completely change the direction of one of America's most controversial murder trials? Or was it simply another twist in a case that's already filled with unanswered questions? To really understand the magnitude of this moment, we have to look back at the exact evidence that brought everyone into this courtroom in the first place. Part 1. The freezing winter morning. It all began on a freezing winter morning in Canton, Massachusetts, back in January 2022. Snow covered the quiet streets as first responders arrived outside a home where Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found lying unresponsive. Investigators quickly focused on Karen Reed, who was O'Keefe's girlfriend at the time. Prosecutors alleged that after a night out, Reed struck O'Keefe with the rear of her SUV, backed into him, and just left him to die in the snow. They point to specific physical evidence, including pieces of a broken taillight found at the scene. And then there's a highly controversial digital Google search, allegedly made hours before his body was found, asking how long to die in cold. Part 2. Two competing narratives. Karen Reed has consistently denied those allegations. Her defense argues that she did not hit John O'Keefe, suggesting instead that he was severely beaten inside the home and then dragged outside. To support this theory, defense attorneys have fiercely questioned the investigative procedures. They've highlighted highly unusual methods, like the fact that local investigators actually used red Solo cups and stop-and-shop bags to collect crucial blood evidence from the snow. They even utilized a leaf blower to clear the crime scene. The defense alleges serious conflicts of interest with the Canton police, demanding a much closer examination of these practices. As weeks of testimony unfolded, jurors listened intently as defense attorneys grilled lead investigators on the stand. They scrutinized every piece of the timeline, revealing striking discrepancies in the sequence of events and intensely questioning the initial handling of the crime scene. The public searched for answers of their own, as each day seemed to introduce another highly specific challenge to the state's physical evidence. Part 3. The unexpected courtroom shock. But just when it appeared both sides had settled into familiar courtroom arguments, an unexpected moment stopped everyone in their tracks. Reporters immediately began taking notes, and experienced courtroom observers realized that something highly unusual had just happened. The shock wasn't just a rumor, it was the revelation of explicit, highly derogatory text messages sent by the lead state police investigator, and if that wasn't enough, it was coupled with the revelation that surveillance video of Reed's SUV in the police sally port appeared to be inverted, with crucial minutes of footage allegedly missing altogether. As the trial moved forward, both sides appeared to be following a familiar pattern. Prosecutors continued presenting their witnesses, while the defense challenged nearly every major conclusion. Then, during the cross-examination of the lead state police investigator, the atmosphere inside the courtroom suddenly shifted. The defense presented these personal text messages, reading them aloud for the jury to hear. It fundamentally challenged the objectivity of the very officer who gathered the crucial taillight evidence. What had begun as another routine day of testimony quickly became one of the trial's most talked-about moments. This unexpected development came during a key exchange, where the investigator was forced to admit to sending deeply biased texts to friends and colleagues about Karen Reed. It immediately drew the attention of the judge, the attorneys, reporters, and everyone following the proceedings, casting a sudden spotlight on the integrity of the investigation itself. Questions that had seemed pretty straightforward suddenly became far more complicated. Lawyers were adjusting their strategies in real time, courtroom observers exchanged surprised looks, and journalists rushed to document every single detail. The revelation that the lead investigator harbored severe personal bias while simultaneously handling the very taillight evidence prosecutors relied upon, it literally sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Prosecutors immediately worked to keep the jury focused on their overall theory of the case, attempting rapid damage control. They argued that even with this highly inappropriate behavior, the broader body of evidence should remain viewed as a whole. According to the prosecution, these unexpected text messages and surveillance discrepancies didn't simply erase months of forensic analysis, medical testimony, or the physical damage documented on Karen Reed's vehicle. They urged the jury to consider every exhibit together, rather than focusing on a single dramatic courtroom moment. But the defense saw it very differently. Karen Reed's attorneys argued that the courtroom surprise highlighted exactly why they had questioned the investigation from the very beginning. They maintained that this wasn't just unprofessional conduct, but potential evidence of a coordinated cover-up. They argued this bias provided a direct motive for evidence tampering, forcefully suggesting to the jury that the taillight pieces were actually planted at the scene after the fact. Part 4. The National Conversation. Through detailed questioning, the defense challenged the reliability of certain statements, the interpretation of evidence, and the core assumptions investigators made while building their case. Within minutes, legal analysts covering the trial began debating the true significance. Some believed it severely weakened key parts of the prosecution's narrative. Others argued it was simply another challenge that jurors would need to weigh alongside the rest of the evidence. Outside the courthouse, supporters wearing Free Karen Reed merchandise gathered, while television commentators replayed the exchange over and over. What made the moment so remarkable wasn't that it provided a clear answer. It was the exact opposite. Instead of simplifying the case, it introduced another profound layer of uncertainty. Between the conflicting medical examiner reports regarding O'Keefe's injuries, the fiercely disputed timeline of the digital Google searches, and now this sudden revelation of investigator bias, it complicated an investigation that had already become one of America's most fiercely debated criminal trials. By the end of the hearing, the presiding judge and everyone inside the courtroom understood that this wasn't just another day of testimony. The judge had to actively weigh these explosive revelations, maintaining strict parameters for what the jury could actually consider. The unexpected development had shifted the conversation entirely, and the trial fundamentally entered a new, highly scrutinized phase. The next battle would no longer be just about introducing evidence. It would be about defending the credibility of every witness, every expert, and every conclusion placed before the jury. The prosecution now faced the heavy burden of proving their science was blind to the investigator's bias. When the hearing ended, the conversation didn't stop at the courthouse doors. Thousands of people online began asking the exact same question. Had the trial just reached its turning point? The legal proceedings continue to unfold, and as with any active criminal case, the court, not public opinion, will determine the final outcome. Throughout the trial, prosecutors have maintained that the totality of the evidence supports their allegations beyond a reasonable doubt. The defense continues to strongly reject those claims, arguing that the investigation left crucial questions unanswered and that the prosecution has entirely failed to meet that high legal standard. Those competing positions remain at the heart of every single hearing. What makes this case so remarkable is that it has grown far beyond a single courtroom. It sparked complex national conversations about digital evidence, the limits of forensic science, questionable investigative practices, and exactly how juries evaluate deeply conflicting testimony. Every new filing, every witness, and every ruling is examined by legal commentators and followed closely by people across the country. For John O'Keefe's family and loved ones, the proceedings are about seeking answers after an unimaginable loss. For Karen Reed, the trial represents a fight against allegations she has repeatedly denied. And for the justice system, it's a stark reminder that every decision must rest on evidence carefully tested in court, not on headlines, speculation, or emotion. As the trial moves closer to its conclusion, one question still hangs over every courtroom session. Was that unexpected courtroom shock simply another dramatic moment in a long legal battle, or will history remember it as the moment that changed everything? Only the final decision of the court will answer that question. But until that day arrives, the Karen Reed case will remain one of America's most closely watched and most fiercely debated criminal trials.